Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Paged Out magazine,
Oh, nice.
issue number 5
All right.
from November 2024.
Cool.
If you haven't checked it out yet, you are in for a real treat.
I've heard good things.
It's packed with technical deep dives, DIY projects, security research,
Sounds right up our alley.
even someone building a KV store using XDP.
Uh,
Don't worry if that last one sounds like complete gibberish to you.
yeah, a little bit.
We'll get to it.
Okay, cool.
That's-
So what really struck me about this issue is the variety of content. I
Yeah.
mean, it's clear that Paged Out
Yeah.
has really evolved.
Mhm.
You know, it's got a sleek new look now.
Yeah.
And even sponsors.
I know. It's like
Wow.
running this awesome magazine is finally paying off for the editor.
That's great to hear.
Speaking of paying off, though,
Yeah.
there's this ad for a cybersecurity boutique that really caught my eye.
Oh, yeah.
They offer what they call bespoke research services.
Bespoke, huh?
I mean, who wouldn't want a team of cybersecurity experts on call like that?
That sounds pretty good.
Right.
So what kind of services do they offer?
Well, they run the gamut from vulnerability discovery and malware analysis
Okay.
to tool development trainings and workshops.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a pretty impressive suite of offerings for sure.
Yeah.
So let's dive into some of the articles themselves.
Okay.
One that really intrigued me was about building a Linux system from scratch
Oh, wow.
using Buildroot and QEMU.
Okay.
It's amazing that you can do all of this with just a laptop and an internet connection.
So you're saying like anyone can do this?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Wow.
Buildroot makes the process surprisingly accessible.
Okay.
Think of it like a recipe book for your Linux system.
All right.
It gathers all the ingredients, the source code,
Mm-hmm.
and cooks them up into a working system.
Okay, so it handles like the dependencies and everything.
Exactly.
That's cool.
QEMU, on the other hand, is like your virtual test kitchen, allowing you to experiment without risking your actual computer setup.
Oh, so it's like a virtual machine.
Exactly.
Okay.
They even recommend using a long-term support branch for stability,
That makes sense.
which is great for beginners.
Yeah, for sure.
But you know what really hooked me?
What's that?
There's this personal story about someone who dedicated 14 years
14 years.
to building an emulator for their childhood computer,
Wow.
the Oric One.
The Oric one. Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
It's pretty obscure,
Okay.
but talk about a passion project.
I mean, that's incredible, 14 years.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because it goes beyond just the technical skill.
Mm-hmm.
Recreating hardware in software can be almost meditative.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very slow and deliberate process.
Yeah.
The author talks about finally getting the 6522 chip working
Oh, wow.
and hearing those first synthesized sounds.
I bet.
It must have been incredibly rewarding after all that time, all those years of work,
Absolutely.
just to hear that little sound.
Can you imagine the feeling of finally fixing a bug?
Yeah,
That was messing up how the aliens moved in your favorite game after 14 years.
that's amazing.
That's some serious dedication.
For sure.
It really speaks to the power of personal projects
Yeah.
and the joy of the journey itself.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, but on to something a bit more flashy.
Okay.
There's an article on building a simple PDS card for a vintage Macintosh to control LEDs.
LEDs, huh?
Remember the processor direct slot?
Oh, yeah, the PDS
It
slot.
gave you direct access to the CPU,
Right.
opening up a world of possibilities for hardware hacking.
Oh, for sure.
The article dives into using a PLD.
A PLD.
That's a programmable logic device for the uninitiated,
Right.
decoding address lines and handling read-write cycles.
That sounds pretty intense.
It can be, but
Yeah.
the author breaks it down in a way that even I could almost understand.
Okay, good.
They even leave a little challenge for readers,
Oh, a challenge.
getting it to work in 24-bit addressing mode.
Oh,
It's like a little side quest for the hardware hacker in all of us.
I like that.
Yeah, right.
So it really plays into that learner persona we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of resourcefulness,
Yes.
this next article about Steve, a remote worker,
Okay.
really made me laugh.
Oh.
He actually used an AVR programmer as a bathroom break extension tool.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
Well, he turned it into a mouse jiggler.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a pretty ingenious and hilarious
Wow.
way to use what you have on hand to, let's say, automate certain tasks.
Okay, that is pretty clever.
Right.
But let's shift gears to a more serious topic.
Right.
The potential for job displacement by AI.
Right.
Specifically GPT.
Yeah, that's a big one these days.
There's an article that tells the story of a ghostwriter whose job was literally replaced by AI.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened to them?
Well, the interesting thing is that instead of giving up,
Okay.
they adapted.
Good for them.
Yeah, and focused on making their work even more unique, highlighting what AI can't replicate.
That's smart.
Yeah.
So it raises an important question.
Yeah.
In a world where AI can generate content so quickly and cheaply,
Right.
what skills are going to be most valuable?
That's a really good point. It's not just about learning new tech.
Right.
It's about cultivating those uniquely human skills like critical thinking,
Yeah.
creative problem solving,
Sure.
emotional intelligence.
Definitely.
Those are things that AI can't replicate,
Right.
at least not yet.
At least not yet.
The article touches on some of the factors driving this job displacement,
Okay, like what?
such as mass production funding constraints
Yeah,
and the demand for fast turnaround times.
that makes sense.
Speaking of data,
Okay.
there's this fascinating article on macOS forensics,
Forensics?
specifically about extracting data from notifications.
So notifications.
Now, you might be thinking,
Yeah.
who cares about notification data?
I mean, who looks at those?
But it turns out they can reveal a surprising amount about a user's activity.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what kind of stuff?
Think about it. The apps they've used,
Oh, okay.
websites they've visited,
Huh?
even snippets of messages they've received.
Wow.
It's all there.
It's all right there.
It's stored in a SQLite database, just
Oh.
waiting to be analyzed.
So this information could be pretty valuable
Oh, yeah.
in investigations or even for digital forensics.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting.
The article explains how to access this data using shell commands
Okay.
and even shows you how to use Plutil
Plutil?
to decode the binary Plutlist data.
So it's like a mini crash course
Yeah,
in macOS digital forensics.
exactly.
That's pretty cool.
It's a good reminder that data is everywhere,
Yeah,
even in places we might not expect.
that's for sure.
Okay, now imagine you're in a cybersecurity scenario
Okay.
where SSH port forwarding is disabled on a server.
All right.
Sound like a roadblock, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, there's a clever workaround
I-
using SSH multiplexers like Mosh and Tmux.
Mosh and Tmux, I've heard of those.
But to understand how it works,
Yeah.
we need to take a quick peek behind the curtain of SSH internals.
Okay, let's go.
SSH relies on something called channels
Shannon.
to multiplex different services
Okay,
over a single TCP connection.
right.
It's like having multiple virtual tunnels running through that one connection.
So that's how it works.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So how does that help bypass the port forwarding restriction?
Well, by creating a persistent shell session with a multiplexer,
Mm-hmm.
you can essentially tunnel traffic through that session,
Oh, okay.
effectively bypassing the port forwarding restriction.
So you're kind of like tricking it.
In a way, yeah.
It's a clever trick that leverages the flexibility of SSH.
Definitely.
But wouldn't the server admin notice this unusual activity
Mm-hmm.
through the multiplexer,
That's a good question.
right?
I mean, it depends on how closely they're monitoring things.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a possibility.
This issue is full of surprises.
I'm telling you.
Next up is something called base64 unused bit steganography.
Base 64 unused bit steganography.
It sounds a little like science fiction.
Yeah. What is that?
It kind of is.
Okay.
Imagine writing a secret message on a piece of paper,
Okay.
then hiding it by taping it to the bottom of a regular letter.
Okay, I get you.
That's basically what steganography does digitally.
Oh, okay.
This specific technique uses the unused bits
Okay.
in a base64 encoded string to store hidden information.
Interesting.
So it's like a digital secret compartment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's pretty neat.
The capacity is limited,
Okay.
but it could be useful for things like watermarking.
Watermarking.
It highlights the fact that there are often creative and unexpected ways to hide data in plain sight.
That's true.
This is all so fascinating.
I know.
I'm already feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And we're only on the first part of our deep dive.
Don't worry.
Gotcha.
There's plenty more to come.
Okay.
We're just getting warmed up.
Okay, ready for more?
Hit me.
This next article is about someone building a KV store using XDP.
Okay.
You mentioned it earlier,
Yeah.
but I have to admit I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, yeah. XDP.
What is that?
It's pretty niche.
Okay.
XDP is like this super fast traffic cop
Okay.
that sits right in the Linux kernel.
Okay.
It can make decisions about network packets
hmm
before they even reach the main processing queue.
So it's like a gatekeeper?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
And then you've got eBPF,
EDPF.
which is like the rule book
Okay.
that tells XDP what to do.
So this person built an entire KV store
Yeah,
using the super fast traffic cop.
pretty much.
That sounds incredibly powerful,
It is.
but also potentially dangerous
Oh, yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing.
For sure.
Exactly.
It's definitely not the most practical KV store,
Okay.
but it's a great example of thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
And the flexibility of the Linux kernel, who knows, maybe it'll inspire someone to come up with an even more creative use for XDP.
Yeah, I love that. That's the beauty of this magazine, right?
Definitely.
It sparks your curiosity
For sure.
and makes you think about things in new ways.
Yeah.
Speaking of thinking differently,
Okay.
there's a really interesting article on the layered security mechanisms in macOS.
Oh, cool.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion,
Okay.
revealing all the different defenses Apple has put in place.
So what kind of defenses are we talking about?
Well, it starts with the obvious things,
Like what?
like gatekeepers and XProtect,
Okay.
which verify the integrity of downloaded files
Right.
and scan for known threats.
Okay.
But it goes much deeper.
Oh.
There's code signing and AMFI,
AMFI.
Apple mobile file integrity,
Oh.
which ensure that only trusted applications can run on the system.
Okay, so it's like a whitelist.
Yeah, kinda.
Interesting.
And then there's sandboxing,
Sandboxing.
which isolates apps from each other
Yeah.
and the core system, limiting the damage they can do if something goes wrong.
Makes sense.
Right. And let's not forget SIP, System Integrity Protection, which prevents even root users from modifying critical system files.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a pretty robust security model.
It sounds like it.
But as with any system, I imagine there are ways to bypass these protections.
Cool, for sure.
Especially for skilled attack.
Yeah, unfortunately, no system is perfect.
That's true.
So that's why it's so important to stay informed about the latest threats and vulnerabilities and to keep your system up to date.
Absolutely. Speaking of vulnerabilities, remember that article we talked about earlier on macOS notification forensics?
Yeah.
The one where those little notification pop-ups can actually reveal a lot about a user's activity?
Yeah, that was crazy.
It's pretty eye-opening.
It is.
Things like the apps they've used, the websites they've visited, even snippets of messages they've received are all stored in a SQLite database.
All just sitting there. So this data could be incredibly valuable in investigations.
Yeah.
Or even for something like digital forensics.
Absolutely.
It's all about knowing where to look and how to interpret the data.
Exactly. Okay, time for a little C++ fun.
C++?
Or maybe C++ frustrations is more accurate.
Oh, yeah. I can relate to that.
This article delves into some common pitfalls
Okay.
that can trip up even experienced developers.
C++ is full of those.
Yes, C++.
A powerful language, but notorious for its complexity and
Right.
potential for gotchas.
The article talks about things like operator precedence,
Okay.
implicit conversions, and the order of evaluation. Those subtle things that can lead to nasty bugs that are hard to track down.
Definitely.
It emphasizes the importance of really understanding those nuances and using tools like compiler warnings
Yeah.
to catch them early on.
Compilers can be your best friend.
I know, right? Especially when you're up against a deadline. It's a good reminder that even the most seasoned developers need to be vigilant and careful when writing C++ code.
Absolutely.
Next up, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of minimizing a Java class file.
Minimizing a Java class file.
This author really went deep,
Okay.
exploring all sorts of techniques to reduce its size.
Like what?
It's a fascinating look into code optimization
Okay.
and understanding the inner workings of the Java virtual machine.
Right.
They use tricks like reusing strings, eliminating unnecessary methods,
Okay.
and even inheriting from a class with a shorter name.
Wow.
I know.
That's clever.
They managed to squeeze their class file down to a mere 275 bytes.
275 bytes.
That's tiny.
That's incredible.
It's a great example of what you can achieve with a deep understanding of the underlying format and a bit of creative problem solving.
I love it.
Okay, this next one is really clever. I never would have thought of hiding data this way.
Oh, really?
It's called Base64 Unused Bits Steganography.
Base64 unused bits steganography.
Essentially, it's a way to hide information within the unused bits of a Base64 encoded string.
So Base64 only uses 6 bits out of each byte.
Right.
Which leaves 2 bits unused.
And those unused bits can be used to store a hidden message.
Like a secret message.
It's like a secret code within a code.
That's a great way to put it.
Exactly. The capacity is limited.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty neat way to sneak information past someone who isn't looking closely.
I like it.
This issue is full of these clever hacks.
For sure.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
there's a practical article about using QR codes to share files directly between devices.
Oh, that's cool.
It highlights how versatile QR codes can be.
Yeah, we're all used to using them for things like sharing links
Right.
or making payments, but they can be used to transfer entire files too.
Which is really useful,
Yeah,
especially when you're in a situation where Bluetooth or Wi-Fi might not be
of
available
course.
or
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah, I could see that being really handy.
The article even provides a simple web app
Okay.
that can decode the QR code
Mm-hmm.
and lets you download the embedded file.
So you don't need any special software?
Nope.
That's convenient.
It's a great example of using existing technology
Yeah,
in a new and innovative way.
I agree.
Now get ready for this.
Okay.
This next article is about building web apps entirely in SQL,
Wait, what?
SQL for the front end.
SQL for the front end.
I've never heard of that.
Me neither.
But apparently there's this tool called SQL Page
Oh, page.
that allows you to build both the front end and back end of a web app
Okay.
using only SQL queries.
So no JavaScript, no HTML,
Nope.
just SQL.
That's a radical departure from the traditional way of building web apps.
Yeah. Usually you have separate languages and frameworks for the front end and back end.
Right.
This is pretty wild.
The idea is that for certain applications,
Yeah.
this approach can simplify development
Mm-hmm.
and reduce the overhead of managing multiple layers.
I can see that.
Though I can see it getting complicated quickly.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
It's a thought-provoking concept for sure.
Definitely.
Who knows, maybe SQL will become the next hot front-end framework.
Maybe.
But I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay, last but certainly not least
Okay.
is a story about a remote worker
Okay.
who decided to build the ultimate bathroom break extension tool.
Bathroom break extension tool.
You heard that right.
What on earth are we talking about?
Well, this resourceful individual
Okay.
used an AVR programmer
Okay.
to create a mouse jiggler.
A mouse jiggler.
You know, to trick his computer into thinking he's still active
Oh, get it?
so he can take longer bathroom breaks.
That's hilarious.
I have to admire their creativity,
Yeah,
even if the purpose is a bit questionable.
I agree.
It just goes to show that technology can be used for all sorts of things,
It really can.
both practical and not so practical.
That's a good story to end this part of the deep dive on.
Yeah,
A lighthearted note.
I agree. All right, let's jump back into this treasure trove of articles. Remember that scenario we talked about where SSH port forwarding is disabled on a server?
Yeah, it's a common problem,
Yeah.
especially in security-conscious environments.
Well, this next article blew my mind. It explains how to bypass that restriction using a multiplexer like MOSH or TMUX.
It's a really clever technique, but it hinges on understanding SSH internals.
You're going to have to break that down for me.
Essentially, SSH uses something called channels to multiplex different services over a single TCP connection. Think of it like having multiple virtual tunnels running through that one connection.
So you're creating a persistent shell session with the multiplexer and then tunneling traffic through that session.
Exactly. And that allows you to bypass the port forwarding restriction. It's a great example of how understanding the underlying protocols can give you a serious edge.
That's what I love about this magazine. It's not just about the what, but also the why and the how. Okay, now for something completely different. A Pong game coded in DirectForth on a Commodore 64.
Now, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. DirectForth is a fourth implementation for the C64, and the article takes you through the process of creating the game from scratch.
I've dabbled in modern game development, but I can't even imagine what it was like programming back then.
It was a very different world. You were working directly with the C64's memory map and registers operating at a much lower level.
It makes you appreciate the ingenuity and skill of those early programmers. They were doing amazing things with incredibly limited resources.
It's a great reminder that limitations can often breed creativity.
Speaking of creativity, let's talk cybersecurity again. There's an article about stack variable recognition and how to thwart it. It gets into some pretty advanced techniques like reverse engineering and code obfuscation.
Right, so decompilers, which are tools that try to turn machine code back into something readable, they often try to figure out how those local variables are allocated on the stack.
But this article explains how you can actually trick them.
Yeah, by creating like these dead code branches that access impossible stack offsets. It confuses the decompiler and makes the code much harder to analyze.
So it's a way to protect sensitive code or make malware more difficult to reverse engineer. It's kind of like a digital smokescreen.
Exactly. It highlights the constant back and forth between attackers and defenders, each trying to outsmart the other.
This next one dives into the world of USB copy protection, or perhaps more accurately, the challenges of implementing it.
It's a really tough problem. If someone can already read files from a USB drive, how do you prevent them from copying them?
The article analyzes a specific copy-protected USB drive and the techniques it uses to restrict access.
But the author actually finds a way to bypass the protection by injecting code into the PDF reader process.
Oh, wow.
It's a fascinating case study in DRM and the lengths people go to trying to protect their intellectual property.
It shows that no security measure is foolproof. There's almost always a way around, especially for someone who's determined enough.
Security is a process, not a destination.
Okay, this next article is for those who love a good challenge. It's about revitalizing old binaries. We're talking about modifying a program without having access to the original source code.
It's a bit like an archaeological dig.
Yeah.
You're carefully excavating the code, trying to understand its structure and function.
The author describes a novel approach called Revitalizes that involves disassembling the binary, annotating it, and then reassembling it with new features added.
It's incredibly meticulous work,
Hmm.
but it allows you to breathe new life into old software, potentially even making it compatible with modern systems.
It's like taking a classic car and restoring it with modern upgrades. This issue of Paged Out has been quite a journey.
It really has. We've explored everything from low-level programming to high-level security concepts, from the challenges of DRM to the ingenuity of early programmers.
It's a testament to the boundless creativity and ingenuity of the tech community.
And a reminder that technology is constantly evolving. There's always something new to learn and explore.
So to anyone listening, I highly recommend checking out Paged Out, magazine issue #5. You'll find something to pique your curiosity, I guarantee it.
And never stop exploring, experimenting, and learning. Who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting just around the corner?
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy hacking.